It's basically a brand new group at the corner position, but I think there's a lot of breakout potential.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast, and stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every potential new hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And today we are continuing our position breakdown series. We are nearing the end. Today is cornerbacks. Tomorrow is safeties. Now, unlike the defensive line where I put them both together, the secondary is just so deep that I think it would be doing it injustice if I lumped them all together, especially safety. When we conclude the series tomorrow, you guys will see how deep safety is. But today, we're looking at corners, and there's a lot of change coming to the corner room. You have lost your top 3 corners from last year, top 4 corners even. You no longer have Torrence. He has moved on to the NFL. D. Ford, who was the starter opposite him, is gone. Ed Woods, who rotated in with D. Ford, is gone. And, of course, Jordan Clark, the stalwart of the secondary and the leader of both the offense and defense, opted to transfer to another school. That's a lot of change. And ASU was very proactive in getting more guys here, but this is a brand new corner room. Like, you're going to be relying on these safeties to really help this transition. But like I said, I do think that there is some potential breakout talent here. There are some really good transfers coming in, and this freshman class looks good, man. Like, they look good. Capital Good. Like, these, we'll talk about them, but we'll start with the transfers. There's 3 transfers that are coming in that are the absolute most notable guys. The first of which is Cole Martin. Martin was a former 4-star, a Activate the Valley kid who played at, I'll have to pull it up here. He played in Arizona. He played at, of course, it's taking nice and long. Played at Basha High School out in Chandler. He is plug and play nickel. To me, there's no competition. He is a very good player. He was very good with Oregon last year. He looks good at ASU. He's wearing 21, which, I mean, if you're a defensive back and you wear number 21, we know what you're about. We know that you're really good. It's just one of those numbers where, come on, it just makes too much sense. He's really good. He is the plug and play at corner. Then you got 2 boundary guys. You got Laterrence, LT Welch, coming from LSU, a former 4-star recruit and somebody who wasn't able to get on the field too much during his time at LSU. But during spring ball, I thought he looked like corner 1. And we'll get to that in the middle part of the podcast where I break down my depth chart. But he looks good. He looks really good. He's big. He's long. He's very talented and athletic. He was able to mirror and match with the best of the receivers during spring ball. He's a stud. To me, that's corner 1. And then you've got Javan Robinson, who also transferred. Robinson spent some time at Washington State. He actually spent 1 year under Brian Ward. So he has kind of that understanding of what Coach Ward is looking for. Out of the defense, he's going to be working with Brian Carrington, who, as we all know, is a very good positional coach for the defensive backs. I think that there's an opportunity for Javan to really grow into a really nice role. There are a couple of year two guys that I'm really interested in. The first, and to me, the guy who is getting the most attention is Keith Abney. And Abney was someone who was highlighted to me by Coach Carrington when we were getting to know some of the guys prior to spring ball, the little press conference opportunity that we had to speak with all the coaches. Keith Abney was one of the ones who was brought up numerous times to me. He is a true sophomore. He was able to get on the field quite a bit last year. He looked good. And he's not the biggest guy in the world at 5'10", 180 pounds, but you can see that he just understands the position. And he's someone that is truly learning how to mirror and match. There is tons of potential here for Keith Abney, and he might be the guy I'm most excited about just from a potential standpoint. Like LT Welch, very excited for him to be corner one. Cole Martin, very excited for him to line up in the slot and take on that Jordan Clark role. As far as like a breakout candidate, Keith Abney's probably the top for me. And then Keontez Bradley is another guy who we saw him a little bit last year. He did end up redshirting, but he also looked really good in spring ball. And I thought that he was able to trade reps with some of the receivers. He had a really good rep, and then there was reps where you could tell he's still learning the position. But Keontez Bradley, definitely someone who has been catching my eye. Him and Keith Abney could be the future of the secondary here, because we don't know how long Welch and Robinson and Martin are going to stay. We don't know if the freshmen are going to stay, but I do think that Abney and Bradley could be some of the biggest foundational pieces here in the secondary. I really like their talent. I really like their upside. They just look like they're ready to go straight into the defense. But speaking of those freshmen, there are a handful of freshmen coming in. There are 4 freshmen coming in. You have the biggest name of the bunch for me is Chris Johnson Jr., but the show was stolen by 2 early enrollees, Rodney Bimage and Tony Lewis Nkuba. And Rodney Bimage, man, it was impossible not to notice him. He really looked like just someone that was ready for an immediate role with the team. And I don't think that ASU was going into this spring practice with the intention of having any of their young defensive backs really inherit big roles. I think they were looking for the transfers or some of the returning guys. And there's plenty of other guys that I'm not going to be able to get to because it's a deep room. But Rodney Bimage, to me, was the most impressive freshman, but that's not a slight to Tony Lewis and Nkuba, who looked equally good. They both look well ahead of where you would expect a freshman to be. We're waiting on Chris Johnson to get to camp, and we're waiting on Plas Johnson to get to camp as well. Plas Johnson recruited as a receiver, or at least listed as a receiver. Coach Carrington told me, no, he's defensive back. We're not sharing him. There you go. There's a lot of faces that are coming to the secondary that are brand new. I love that Keith Abney and Keontez Bradley are back for the team, and I think that they have a really good opportunity to earn some big-time starting roles. I love that ASU got a player of LT Welch's caliber. I think that he's corner one, at least after spring ball. Very impressive to me. One of the more impressive guys on the defensive side of the football. Cole Martin, great addition in numerous different ways. But I just love everything that ASU was able to add to the defensive side of the football. As long as everybody stays, because everybody has at least 2 years of eligibility. At least 2 years of eligibility. There is potential for the secondary to really grow with each other, find a groove, and become studs. But we're about to break down my potential depth chart for the team, corner one, corner two, and nickel. We're going to hop into it right now. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but may be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Over 86% of small businesses will get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time or resources to hire. And LinkedIn is constantly finding new ways to make that process easier, and even launched a feature that helps write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Wherever you get those podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. You're going to get all the biggest news of the day without the screaming and shouting that you would get from Fox Sports or ESPN. Back into our conversation, we're going to take a look at a potential depth chart for the corner room. The way we're doing it is corner 1, corner 2, nickel, and then the best of the rest. Corner 1, I've already said it many, many times on this podcast. It's LT Welch. He looked absolutely phenomenal for ASU, and he fits and looks the role at 6'1", 193 pounds. He was a high 4-star recruit out of high school. Someone who just has all the boxes checked off. You're just waiting to see if that potential can come through with it. And it looks pretty good. In his spring ball, I don't think there was a more consistent corner than LT Welch. He just looks the part. He looks like someone that is going to find a really nice niche with the program. There is a wide open opportunity at corner right now. Like I said, you lost your top 4 corners, and 3 of them were boundary guys. LT Welch should be able to come in and seize a role for himself. Continue to build on strong practices. There's no reason he can't. I guess we'll put it that way. I'm very excited about him. Corner 2, there's a handful of options here. I almost went with one of the true freshmen. I really went back and forth between Rodney, Bimage, and the guy I ended up listing as corner 2, but I did go with Keith Abney, the returner, the true sophomore, the guy who saw quite a bit of playing time last year. Keith Abney has really just impressed. I don't think there was any real expectations for him as a true freshman last year. And yet he was able to find himself onto the football field. And some of that was because ASU was doing rotations. Some of it was because it got to a point where you felt good about him being on the football field. He's someone that I feel has a really good upside on this team. I think that he's also someone that is really just showed a ton of improvement. He gets those live reps. You see the struggles. You see the potential going into year 2. I would venture to say it's his job to lose. I think right now between Welch and Abney, you feel pretty good about them being starters, and it would be up to them to lose the job. They feel like the easiest guys to predict, in my opinion. But again, there's there's a ton of other guys. Javan Robinson's not someone we should sleep on. I think that the connection with Brian Ward is a very big deal for Robinson. And I know that he wasn't coming to this program as one of the biggest names for the transfers, but he's still a very good player. And even if he's a bit undersized at 169 pounds, there's time for him to be able to grow into that body a little more. He's got the 6-foot frame. I would not be surprised if he was corner one opposite of LT Welch. Would not be surprised one bit. If nothing else, he just brings the size for you because Keith Abney is only 5'10". So you got a couple of more inches there. He is lighter, but I think it makes some sense to be able to line him up as one of your starting corners. Again, I wouldn't be surprised. I would almost put in my notes like Keith Abney or Javan Robinson, but I am giving the distinct edge here to Keith Abney. Javan Robinson, definitely someone to watch. Keontez Bradley, next up for me. He's just impressed, and I don't see how you're going to find a way to keep him off the field. Him and Abney look like really phenomenal second-year players. I think that you're just going to find a way to get Keontez Bradley on the field. I just don't know that he is a starter for you. I want to go to the nickel position now. It's Cole Martin. I don't feel like it's close. This is probably the best corner on the team right now. He is arguably the best player in the secondary. It's an easy fit. He's a high upside kid. He was a 4-star recruit, a 4-star transfer. He played well for Oregon last year. He's coming home. Feels like all of the pieces are in place here and everything kind of fits to plug in for Cole Martin being an easy start for this team. In fact, if you go through the 11 starters on defense, I think Cole Martin might be the easiest guy to say, yeah, it's a starter. You would have a couple of other guys where, like, yeah, it makes too much sense for them to start for you, but Cole Martin, I think, is the easiest guy to plug in. And then also got to talk about Rodney Bimage and Tony Lewis and Nkuba. Those guys are really talented freshmen that we have already gotten to see a little bit out of them. If they're able to bring that momentum from spring ball to training camp, just like what I said about Keontez Bradley, it's just going to be really difficult to keep them off of the football field. There's other guys as well. There's Chris Johnson. There's Plas Johnson. There's Adama Fall. There's Jack Ball. There are tons of other corners on this team. Those are the guys who stand out to me the most. And it's going to be really interesting once training camp rolls around in the end of July, beginning of August, to see the amount of rotations. I almost think, like we talked about on Saturday, about the linebacker position with a lot of rotation. If you didn't check that out, go and check it out. I said that you saw a lot of rotation during spring ball with the linebackers. It was kind of hard to get a pulse on who the starters were going to be. And that could very well be the case for the corner position as well, where I think that there's guys that stand out a little bit more to be like plug and play guys. There's still nonetheless players in the secondary that are going to make things very cluttered in a very good way. And it's going to lead to very good competition. It's going to lead to guys iron sharpen iron kind of mentality. This is a really good situation for ASU to have, but we could see in training camp, like every single practice, it's a different lineup. You could have this lineup that I have: LT Welch, Keith Abney, Cole Martin starting. But then the next day you could have Rodney Bimage, Chris Johnson Jr., Javan Robinson out there. And then after that, you could have Cole Martin lined up outside, and you could have Keith Abney lined up in the slot. And then you could have Plas Johnson as corner 2. There's there's seemingly a lot of different ways that this secondary can get lined up right now. And again, I think that's a very good thing. I think it's a very good problem for ASU to have. It's just going to be very hard for us to predict by the time week 1 rolls around, hey, who's starting? It's a good problem to have. This is a deep room. How it ends up shaking out, I think no matter what, ASU is going to be in a very good situation. But we're going to go ahead and transition to the last part of the podcast. We're going to take a look at the upside and the downside of this unit. I think there's plenty of upside, but of course, there's definitely some ways where it may not shake out. We're going to talk about it. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to spend on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And of course, a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Winding down this podcast with the upside and the downside of this team, of this position, the upside and the downside of the corners. Upside, I think there's a handful of things. The one that stands out the most is that LT Welch stands out to or reaches his 4-star potential. Welch looks great, man. He passes the eye test. He's looked good through a month's worth of practices. By the time the season rolls around, he's going to have some very good competition he's going to be going up against this year. There's no shortage of tests to see if Welch is ready to be corner 1. If he lives up to his billing, you have your new Torrence, because Torrence was an outstanding corner for you, someone who more often than not was getting great reps and shutting down opposing receivers. His void to fill is large. LT Welch could potentially step into that void, become ASU's #1 corner. He's not the only one I think could break out. Keith Abney, that's another upside for the team. Best case scenario is Keith Abney turns into the stud that we believe he can be. And again, he's a young guy. He's only a true sophomore. You could have 3 more years out of Keith Abney. You're hoping that he's able to continue to stack performances, stack those practices, come into week 1 and just ball out. You're also hoping that your freshman can continue to play well. That's another upside here, is that Bimage, Nkuba, Johnson, both Johnsons could turn into really good role players. I think that's your best case scenario, is they become role players. You're hoping with the way everything is shaken out, nobody redshirts. Last year, it was a lot of transfers at seemingly every position for Arizona State. Now it's a lot of team building that's been going on, and ASU was aggressive in adding guys through the portal and adding guys in the recruiting class and bringing guys back. But if you're able to get these 4 freshmen involved to a point where they don't redshirt, I think that speaks volumes about how good you did in recruiting these kids. There is a ton of upside for seemingly every one of these kids. Bimage and Nkuba, we've already got a taste of. But Chris Johnson Jr., if you're new to the podcast, he's someone that I have hyped up plenty of times before. I think he might be the best defensive back of this incoming recruiting class. He's someone that checks the boxes for me. He's a state champion. I'm excited for Chris Johnson. And Plas Johnson is someone that has been hyped up before. Like I mentioned earlier, you had Coach Carrington say, yeah, no, he's a DB. We're not sharing him. We really like him. They are excited about this freshman class. A best case scenario, none of these guys redshirt because they just get on the field so much. And then the last big upside here, this is more as a team, as a unit standpoint, is you just end up becoming a really stout defense. You at least get the job done well enough that the safeties aren't as stressed out to be making up for the inefficiency of the corner position. The downside now. The biggest downside here is that you have some growing pains and pretty severe growing pains. This is a brand new secondary. This is a brand new corner position. You lost your top 4 guys. You are replacing them with a ton of freshmen. You're replacing them with a ton of transfers. You're replacing them with guys who didn't get on the field very much last year. This could be a serious learning curve for Arizona State. I am hyping them up because I love the talent. They could easily just turn into a unit that is just lost, I guess. I don't want to say lost. Trying to find itself, trying to find its identity. This is not a guaranteed position. Now, with linebacker, I said it's a boomer bust unit, the biggest boomer bust on the team. I would not say that about corner because I still think that this is a good enough room to where you kind of know what you have, but they can still be a liability. The last big downside, and this isn't even something I'm really counting on, is you just don't get production. I'm not looking for my corners to rack up interceptions. I'm not even looking for them, like one of the guys, to be top 5 in tackles. That doesn't bother me. I just want them to be good enough to create good coverage and force quarterbacks into bad decisions. Let the safeties get the interceptions. Let the defensive line get the sacks because the coverage is so good. But at the same time, if you don't get anything out of your corners, if you don't get any kind of turnovers, if there's no pass breakups or tackles behind the line of scrimmage for when you send the corner blitz or anything like that, that's bad news. You don't need to have 10 interceptions from all your corners. But if you walk away with 0, that's not great. And ASU didn't have a lot of interceptions last year. They had 6. This is a unit that you still need them to be able to come out and put up any kind of production. You can't, 5 interceptions. You can't have these guys come out and not give you anything. There still needs to be something, even if it's in the pass breakup department. If they don't contribute anything, you're in trouble. You don't need Richard Sherman out there. You don't need Marcus Peters out there. You don't need Aqib Talib out there. Insert any other ball hawking defensive back. But you do need to have some sort of production from the team. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm all about shutdown coverage. Let the rest of the team worry about the turnovers. I am all about getting a good rotation of guys. You would love to have like Cole Martin, LT Welch, and Keith Abney lock down the 1, 2, 3 spots. But when you're able to rotate in Rodney Bimage, when you're able to rotate in Keontez Bradley, that's where you really find the strength of this secondary. That's the highest upside here. The downside, there's a lot of rotation. You don't get anything out of them. But I want to know what you guys think of the secondary, most particularly the corner position, because we're going to be looking at safety tomorrow. Do you really like the room? Are you nervous about the room? Who are you most excited about? Let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. but wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get an update when we post new content. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. We'll be back again tomorrow to conclude the positional breakdown series. We'll be taking a look at safety, where I don't even know who the starters are going to be. I'm going to need a lot of time to think that over, but we'll talk about it more tomorrow. We'll see you then. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked